Hello Tech Time Travelers, and today we are going to be attempting to get this Commodore or MOS KIM-1 up and running after God knows how many years it's been sitting basically dead. This is actually the second KIM-1 that I've ever purchased. There was one before it, which for reasons known only to my ADHD brain, I basically sold. And well, I know why it was. I bought it, I think it was about 12 or 13 years ago. It was right as I was sort of really getting into collecting in earnest. It was my first deliberate, I'm purchasing this for the purposes of collecting purchase. So I got it, but I was kind of new to vintage computers, and I was used to machines where you basically had a power switch and you plugged it into the wall and away it went. And the KIM-1 is not that. The KIM-1 required basically the user to supply their own power supply and other gear to operate the thing. And it was actually really simple. It was just like plus 5 volts. But just that alone was enough to intimidate me out of actually trying to hook the thing up. The one that I had before, it was basically mounted on some kind of plywood or ceramic-y kind of backing, and it looked to me from what I had seen in the paperwork that came with it that it had been actually used to control some sort of HVAC system. So this was a working KIM in the sense that, you know, it wasn't just something that was played around as a hobby thing and then put away. It was actually in regular daily use. But yeah, I ended up selling it. I think it was because I'd purchased something else. It might have been an Apple III. I needed the money, and yeah, I took a little bit of a bath on it. The KIMs were going back then for, I think, around $500 to $600, and I think that's what I paid for it. And I ended up selling it for $300. So there's something about being a Canadian eBayer that just turns US buyers off, and yeah, the stuff trades for a big discount here. Anyway, I took a bath on that, so I reluctantly packaged it up, shipped it off, and spent probably about 6 months regretting it. And then this one turned up, and I got this for, I think it was 115 bucks. So I don't know if I'm ahead or whatever. I think I'm definitely ahead now because the prices for these things have gone through the frickin' roof. Like, people are, I don't know what's going on. Like, people are bidding, you know, $1,700, $2,000 for one of these. Upwards of $2,000 if it's the original MOS KIM-1 without the Commodore branding. Yeah, it's crazy. And even these, which, you know, this is a later revision, this is revision F, they're going for well over $1,000, unless you're a Canadian. If I go to sell this right now, it's probably gonna sell for 100 bucks. I don't know. So anyway, I picked up this one for cheap. I was happy again. I had a KIM-1 in my collection, and I vowed I would never sell it. And then eventually I learned how to actually set it up, you know, connect a power supply and everything, which is what these wires are about, and try to use it. And it didn't work. And I was really upset. Basically, the KIM-1 is pretty robust overall, but it has a couple of weak points. And the weak points are these two chips right here. These are what are called RRIOT chips, which stands for, and I'm going to do this off memory, Okay, evidently my memory doesn't work so well on camera, so I'm just going to switch to narration mode here. So the 6530 is what's called a ROM-RAM I/O timer, or RRIOT chip. This chip provides several functions. It has a little bit of RAM. It can handle I/O for various things, joysticks, switches, etc. for example, and it has a programmable timer where you might need that. It also has 1 kilobyte of ROM, which was custom programmed by MOS/Commodore for whatever purpose the end user required. It's very similar to the 6532, although that chip doesn't have any ROM. Every 6530 has a part number featuring a dash and 3-digit code. The code tells you what it was programmed for. Wikipedia actually has a whole list of known codes. The KIM-1 uses two 6530s, a -002 and a -003. As I understand it, the -002 has the main system ROM which runs the whole device, and the -003 has some functions relating to external I/O. Why did MOS/Commodore do this? Well, probably to help their clients save money, since it eliminated the need for additional EEPROM or ROM chips.
Plus, they own their own foundry, so why not? Anyway, these chips are now nearly a half-century old, and they're becoming one of the more common parts to fail on machines like the KIM-1. And that's a problem because they aren't something that you can easily find loose, nor are they easily substitutable. You can't just plug another 6530 into a KIM-1, it has to be the correct part number. And you can't just plug in a vanilla 6532 since it lacks the vital ROM code. To be fair, I'm sure MOS/Commodore never expected then school children would be middle-aged nostalgic adults still trying to use these things in 2024. But nonetheless, they are a sore point for collectors. Literally every other chip used on the KIM is generic and easily replaceable. The last 6530 relating to the KIM that I saw for sale recently went for $400 untested. Yipes. Now, of course, some smart people, realizing an avalanche of dead KIM-1s was coming, decided to mobilize and do something about this. One of the first efforts I became aware of was described on the VC Fed forums and designed by Dwight Elvey and turned into a PCB by Lou Ganning. And I think a version of this board was produced by Corsham Technologies. The board was useful for replacing one of the RRIOT chips. Unfortunately, I wasn't fast on the draw and all of the first runs of these boards sold out. Then, sadly, Bob Corsham passed away, which shuttered Corsham Technologies for good. However, this past Christmas, I spotted an auction for these really slim KIM-1 ROM adapters offered by RetroSpy Technologies, using a small Atmel EEPROM instead to hold the ROM code. You just had to supply your own readily available 6532 RRIOT chip, and the adapter would emulate either the -002 or -003 chip depending on the jumper setting selected. The best thing about them though is that they are a really compact design, allowing you to install replacements for both 6530s if need be concurrently. They cost about $40 and I grabbed two just in case both my 6530s were shot. Anyway, on to the repair. So obviously the first thing I'm going to do is remove the original suspect 6530 using my new soldering iron and this fancy Japanese made solder sucker with the silicone tip that works really well. Desoldering is one of my least favorite parts of the repair process with old computers, as the old PCBs can be very fragile. Often the pins for chips and stuff are bent sideways, and getting the legs of a component fully free can be really taxing. Plus, this chip has been removed by me previously, so it's even riskier. Yeah, I could invest in a desoldering gun from Hakko or such, but those things aren't cheap. They're nearly $500, and this $30 steel solder sucker mostly does okay. Once I get into the right rhythm, things usually go pretty smoothly. And there we go, there's a RRIOT on the loose. Now to install the socket. And I'm going to apologize here about my crappy camera work. This is why I don't often film repairs. It requires extra high levels of situational awareness as to where you are relative to the camera. But anyway, I muddle my way through getting a 40-pin socket soldered in. You know, it's interesting, I've seen some early and later KIMs that were socketed. I'm not 100% sure they were from the factory, but I'm pretty sure they are. Socketing does add a few extra bucks for production, and it does also introduce some potential problems down the road, but man are they more convenient for repairs. And there we are, new socket in place, now to fit the RRIOT replacement. Now, I don't want in any way to put down past replacement board designs, because I'm just grateful people attempted this at all, but these RetroSpy ones, if they work, yeah, these are a really good compact design. They're a little more subtle in telegraphing that your board isn't fully original anymore also. And being able to fit two side by side in cases where both RRIOTs are toast is really useful. The only thing I'm not wild about is the dark blue solder mask, which makes these parts somewhat obviously modern. If I had the ability, I'd do these and just leave the solder mask off, like the KIM itself, to blend in more, but that's a minor quibble. As mentioned, these replacements have the crucial ROM code and the little Atmel chips, and I think some custom programming was done to mimic the functionality of a 6530. But you still need a generic 6532 to use the thing. And that's okay, at least we're sticking mostly with vintage parts here to make the machine work. Alright, to the parts bin. Yeah, some years ago I won an auction for 2 cases of mostly Commodore, but also a few Apple II parts, like stacks of CPUs, support chips, and even some really rare PET ROMs, along with a box of PET keys and switches and springs. They came from the estate of a Commodore repairman, and so far all have worked. Anyway, I just need to grab a 6532 here and plug in. There we go. Now time to apply power. And cross fingers. For power, I'm just using one of my spare Amiga 1000 power supplies. It puts out a nice steady plus 5 volts and is color coded in a way that even I can't screw things up. Alright, back to monotone monologue.
Alright, I always check the wires like 50 times before I plug anything in, because, you know, Bad things can happen sometimes when you're not careful. And I am nothing if not exceedingly careful. Well, that's not true, but for this sort of thing I am. Anything involving the application of power, I think twice. Okay, so everything is in place, everything's facing the right direction. I don't have any pins misaligned. I've got my ground hooked up, got power hooked up. All right, well, I guess we're ready to see if this thing is actually gonna work for the first time ever since I've had it. I kind of don't think it will, because I've been through this a few times, and I've never, ever been able to get anything out of it, so if this fixes it, that's going to be amazing. One concern I have is that I may have had two bad 003 ROMs up here, so maybe this isn't going to fix it, but at least it'll eliminate the other one as a suspect, as long as this chip is good, which I'm pretty sure it will be. Okay, so here we go. Let's find a power cord to plug in with. Power on in 3, 2, 1. Power supply is running. Reset. And nada. Awesome.
Dang it. Okay, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe both ROMs are dead. Just to be sure, the 6532 I pulled from the parts bin isn't bad. I'm going to try swapping in another one. And for extra good measure, I'll try a different RetroSpy replacement board as well. I'm reasoning that it's pretty unlikely two of each of these would be dead.
Okay, so that's in the socket. Best I can tell. That's another nightmare, is that maybe this new old stock socket I had kicking around has got some issues. But yeah, we're not going to go there right now. Let's see what happens. Different board plugged in. And again, we got 0. Damn. Yeah, this board is just not giving it up. I've replaced damn near everything on this board and it just doesn't want to work. Okay, so what do we do now? I guess the next step is going to be to take out the 003 chip here and try and eliminate that as a suspect in case both of these were bad. That's the only thing I can think of. And we just kind of take it from there.
All right, well, let's pull that 003 chip, a little desoldering, and voila. Oh my God, it works. Sort of. Yeah, as soon as I hit the reset, it dies, but still, that's like the first thing I've ever seen come up on these LEDs. Like, I can't describe how amazing that is. Wow. So I think we're kind of getting down to the short strokes here. I think we have the KIM basically working. I think what we're dealing with now is just my early lack of repair skills. We probably have some things that aren't soldered in properly, or shorts, or broken pads, and so on. I've noticed if I press on a particular area on the board when it's powered, right here around RAM chip U9, it tries to boot up. With some testing via digital multimeter, I realized that two of the RAM traces are shorted together. Separating them should help, and it does a little bit. But I still need to hold my finger down on this RAM chip to get any action. Perhaps the socket I installed here is no good. I'm going to remove the second 6530 adapter and just install one of the original 6530s there, the -003 chip. I no longer think this was an issue, and subsequent testing shows the machine still tries to work with it installed. I did try swapping the original 6530-002 chip in place again, but as I do this, nothing works at all. I ended up spending a few hours inspecting the board, especially in the area where the RAM is. Here I desoldered and socketed all 8 of the RAM chips originally, and because the traces underneath are so tightly packed, it's pretty easy to break or accidentally bridge something here. And yeah, my handiwork here is awful. So I'm going to go over it very carefully and scrape away any solder that looks too close to a trace or try to suck some of it up while taking care not to break anything else further. I eventually figured out that I did have a very specific problem with the RAM chip or socket in U9, and after swapping things around and reflowing the solder for each socket pin, yeah, I don't know exactly what I did here, but yeah, it didn't work initially, but after swapping another RAM chip into U9, suddenly everything's happy. I'm still suspicious of the socket it's in, but like the president said this week, take the win. Nice. So for our final act, let's actually try programming this thing. That'll show if it's really working or if it's just sort of having enough wherewithal to boot up.
Okay, so we've got ourselves all set up here, and the machine seems to be stable. It's resetting properly. It seems to like having that RAM chip in that spot. I don't know. There's probably something wrong with the socket. It's not making a proper connection, and this little chip has twisted it in just the right way. Whatever the case may be, I'm not gonna mess with it right now. I'm just so happy to see this thing actually working. This thing has been basically a doorstop for 11 years. Every now and again, I've taken it down and tried to fix something, you know, because I was in a little bit of denial. I didn't want to believe that one of these ultra unobtainium chips was dead. Yeah, I literally tried everything that I could, but ultimately I had to wait for smarter people than me to come up with a fix. And this fellow at RetroSpy came up with just the thing that I needed. I don't know if his design is just a tweak of what Dwight Elvey and others did, but I'm grateful to all of them for kind of kicking this in gear, because, you know, these chips are, I mean, this date code on this is 1978. So, I mean, it's getting pretty close to 50 years, right? So you can't really expect these to go on too much longer. So what I've selected here, as I mentioned, is basically just an addition program. It's going to take two numbers that we specify in memory. It's going to add them together, and then hopefully it's going to pop the result up on one of these four LEDs to the left. I believe these LEDs are basically dual purpose. I didn't do a whole ton of research for this video because I wasn't really expecting it was going to work out, but I think these can display both the address that you're at as well as results from programs that you run. Now, one thing I do love about the way they've laid out this program, this is basically just a printout of a PDF of the original manual, is they're very clear about which keys you have to press. I have had so many manuals for computers, which I hesitate to call them manuals because they really leave out a lot. Or they assume that you're an electronics engineer and it's just going to make sense to you what you need to do to get the computer to do something. But on this one, they're very explicit. This is very much a beginner's kind of thing. And yeah, we should be able to follow this pretty easily. The keypad here is pretty basic. We've got hexadecimal keypad, which is starting to become kind of typical for single board computers of this era. The RS is our reset. ST, I think, is to step through different parts of your program, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that. Go is basically just run the program. AD is address mode, so basically hit this, and if I choose an address I want to go to, it's going to take me there and show me what the memory contents are presently. DA basically allows me to change the memory contents, and if I want to keep going forward and entering new memory contents as I enter a program, going forward, all I have to do is hit the plus button to advance to the next memory location, and then I can just enter in whatever I want. So yeah, looking at this program, it's in two parts. That's the main part of it there. And then the second part here, I think, is the part that tells the computer where to fetch the data that's going to be added together, what addresses they're at. So yeah, we'll just start following the directions here. It shouldn't be too hard. So we're going to go AD, and we're going to go to RAM location 2. And then we're going to go to data entry mode, and we're going to put in 1-8. Next is A5, 00, 65, 01. Yeah, I mean, it seems to be working pretty good. I'm bouncing it around a little bit here, almost kind of on purpose to see if it shakes anything loose with the RAM, but it's hanging in there. It should be an 8.5, FA, A9. Yeah, that's a pretty nice keypad. Some of the keypads that I've worked with on these early machines, they have a little bit of a bounce problem where you hit the key and it enters things twice or enters things wrong. But this one's nice and sure-footed. It's got a nice feel to it. So 0B should be 8.5. FB. And this is another thing that could mess me up because the B looks an awful lot like a 6. The 6 has an extra segment at the top there to distinguish it, but it does kind of look like a 6 to me. So that could be problematic in the future. That'll be something I definitely am scratching my head over one day. 4C, 4F, and 1C. Perfect. So now we want to go to the next part of the program. So I want to hit address 00F1. Oops, that was scary. Okay, so we're at F1, and it wants us to change that to 00. So I think this is telling you what memory address it needs to go to find the numbers that we're going to add. And then we hit AD and we go to memory location 0. And we switch to data entry mode 02. So basically they're going to put in the numbers 2 and 3 in this example. They don't really say what their intent is here, but I'm guessing it's going to add those two numbers. So we should see a 5 on the display when we run this. 03. Is it memory location 1? Oops. Okay. And then basically we hit go. And we should see a 5 show up right there. Nope. What happened? 2 and 3 in my universe is 5. So let's just check what happened. A000 is 2. And A001 is 3. Huh. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, there we go. I goofed. I think it goes from whatever memory address you're at there, and I just hit go at memory address 001, so I think that was just displaying random junk. But that is a 5, 2 plus 3 is 5 last time I checked, so that's good. We can confirm this though, if we go to address 0 again, and I'll just change this number to a 4, and then 4 plus 3 will equal 7. And that'll prove for sure if it's actually working. Okay, 4 plus 3. Okay, now we're on the right memory address to go from. Yeah, there you go, 7. Well, that is really cool. This was not a result I was expecting at all for this repair job. Like again, when something hasn't worked ever, you kind of start thinking it's never gonna work, and especially when we've tried over and over again to get it going. But yeah, I've made it. Thank you so much to RetroSpy for producing these. Thank you to all the guys like Dwight Elvey and Lou and those guys for coming up with the initial design to get around this problem. Yeah, I mean, these chips, they're only going to fail more going forward. And like I said, you can find them on eBay, but they're expensive. You know, $400 or $500 for an untested chip is kind of dicey. So this is wonderful. I'm so excited to have this working. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it immediately, other than try and clean it up. You know, get rid of some of my more egregious mistakes. Probably try and find some proper, I think they're called cinch connectors that go onto the edge connectors here, and solder stuff to those so that we're not having wires soldered to the actual pins. And that's about it. You know, I'll probably just kind of leave it as is for now. You know, I kind of want to get rid of that socket that is suspect, but I kind of don't at the same time because it is working right now. And if it continues to work with me moving it around the shop and putting it on and taking it off the shelf and using it, then I'm tempted to just kind of leave it as it is. But yeah, that is super, super exciting to finally have this thing working. This thing has been on my repair list for eons and I can finally cross it off. Yippee!
So that's really cool, a working KIM-1. I tried to look into my records to see when I bought this thing, but I can't find it. It's got to be at least 10 years ago. It spent nearly a fifth of my life sitting there on the shelf as a pretty little bookend. But now, thanks to the efforts of others and my own shaky repair skills, it's good to go. I'm sure we'll revisit this machine in the future, but for now I'm going to take that win and do a victory lap. I've got other videos I need to get done here anyway. So yeah, if you like this video, please let me know with a thumbs up. If not, you know what to do. If you're new here and you like my stuff, feel free to subscribe. If you really like what I do and want to support the repair and preservation of these vintage machines, as well as new videos about them, feel free to join my Patreon crew. I release exclusive behind-the-scenes stuff to them, as well as early previews of forthcoming videos. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.